and welcome to Thinking is Free, proudly brought to you by Chinmaya Mission New Zealand.
Howdy everyone, and welcome back. My name's Akash, and with us in the studio we have Ishanji and Pooja.
Howdy on.
Howdy on.
So I hope you caught the end of the last podcast where we were discussing marriage and Pooja brought to light divorce. And I know it was, we could have covered it in that session, but I feel like now we've got just a bit more space to explore, ask questions and see where we go, because I do find that, like you've said, there is this being quite traditional, divorce is not very traditional and there's often a negative connotation towards it. It's people often see it from a place of reputation is diminished as well, where this is how it looks like on this family and this didn't work out, it's sours, and everyone's just like, and then what Pooja was saying as well is that then frames what marriage is to some individuals who have had parents who have gone through divorce. But then also, if that's going to make people happier not being together, then is that a good thing? Do you want to add, before Ishanji answers, is there anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, even sometimes it taints your view of marriage when people stay together and they're so unhappy, and you're like, well, just get divorced. Like, if you're so miserable in your marriage and if you're so unhappy, like that, I don't want to enter that. Like if my parents are married and they're so unhappy together, and that's what I'm seeing growing up, it would make sense that I wouldn't want to get married. Like I wouldn't want to be, and I feel like people are also like in the conversation around marriage not being permanent, maybe like as we discussed last time, like it's not a relationship isn't like the be all end all of like your life. That like lack of permanence, maybe like, I don't know how divorce plays into that. And like,
yeah. So traditionally, as in from a spiritual standpoint, or a scriptural standpoint, I should say, rather than a spiritual standpoint, because the purpose of marriage was understood clearly and people had that understanding as they were growing up, as they went through schooling, education, as to what is the reason a person enters into a marriage. The alignment of those greater purposes allowed for differences at the physical, emotional, and intellectual personalities to be catered for. And they wouldn't lead to a breakdown of the relationship itself, because the spiritual purpose is still being served.
Mm-hmm.
In the absence of that, obviously, one will become extremely miserable once the foundations of a relationship are broken or challenged. And what one should do is take forth steps to mitigate them, to overcome them. And as a last resort, I guess, yes, divorce does have a place in modern society, because certain decisions have been made with a lack of understanding. And in time, we have come to understand that there was a mistake committed and we've done everything we can to overcome it. And yet, if things are not working out, moving away from it is okay. As in, like, this is what I think. This is my understanding of it, that since relationships aren't the entire purpose of life, but in saying that, we have to also recognize what the impact that action, in this case divorce, has on the people around us, the children. Is it that important that I have to break apart my family for it? In certain situations, yes. In majority of them, perhaps no. But the moment you say, yes, it's okay, we'll start justifying it. That's how the human mind works. And the moment we say no, there'll be people taking advantage of it. And that's the human mind as well. So there is no answer which says, yes, it's okay, or no, it's not okay. It's on a case-to-case basis. And it depends on the situation, on what the people involved are going through and what impacts it's going to have on the people around the individuals who are in that relationship. Because to break apart a family, it has huge consequences on the children's mind as well. Not entirely healthy, but we started on the wrong footing itself. Do we have a better choice? So it has to be very carefully examined, and it's not just a yes or no from the scriptural standpoint, validating whatever we feel like doing. What I would like to emphasize is understand or have a greater understanding of the institution of marriage and what purpose it serves in our life, and try and live it through that rather than our superficial understandings that we have come to live with of marriage today. If that makes sense.
It does. I think that's a lot to digest. So I'll have to think about it. But
Is there, how in the traditional Indian wedding there's so many different practices during that ceremony? Is there a specific spiritual ceremony to go through when you go through a divorce? Because now, like modern day, you just sign a paper with a lawyer and that's it.
Back in the days, no, there wasn't.
Oh, really? You just decide. See you later.
I see in the traditional way, the marriage actually ended when a person entered the sannyasa ashrama. Right? Marriage was not for till the day I die. You have grahastha ashrama.
Yeah.
And the day you see your grandchild's face, you graduate into vanaprastha. And thereafter, your life is not as partners, but as friends. Leading to sannyasa, where all relationships are given up.
Well, that kind of, that's interesting, to put this like kind of temporal,
because it serves a
framework.
purpose.
Yeah.
Right? It because I had vasanas or these tendencies or desires to have a family, want companionship, achieve certain goals in the world outside. Once they're achieved, it's fulfilled its purpose. I have to move past it. And once a person enters vanaprastha stage, the relationship turns into more of a friendly companionship where the goal is spiritual unfoldment given the predominance, and the secondary role is supporting the upcoming generation. But today, we don't get out of grahastha ashrama itself till the day we die.
Yeah.
And sannyasa is nowhere talked about.
Yeah.
Right? So we are living incomplete lives.
Yeah.
We are expecting permanency from that which is impermanent.
Yeah.
And at the base of it, this need for companionship, physical intimacy, emotional support, financial support, whatever it may be, does not go away until the day we die. And so you see people breaking one marriage, as in getting divorced, then a second marriage, getting divorced, then a third marriage. How long are we going to keep doing the same thing?
I was just going to ask, what do you think about the people who get married in their like 60s, 70s and...
No comments.
Because that is such a common thing as well, that we often see.
And I guess we have to ask the question, what is the purpose of life?
Mm.
Are relationships it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So while religion and spirituality teaches us how to have amazing relationships, it also tells us at the same time, relationships aren't the goal of life. They are a means to achieving spiritual unfoldment. That is what that matters.
Mm.
And that's what we have to focus on as well, because happiness is within.
Mm.
As long as I think there's another person who's going to make me happy, we are always dependent on that person. The
Yeah.
keys to our happiness lies in someone else's pocket.
It's interesting. Pooja, any more thoughts on?
I think I'd just like to know, like, in terms of like fights and times of turmoil, what is the best way to maybe get through it, to avoid kind of that last resort of divorce? Because I think what I've heard from like older generations is they always say you should learn how to fight and learn how to fight properly in your marriage. I've never understood what that means. I understand why they say it, like there is a way to like resolve conflict. So like learn how to resolve conflict in a healthy way is what they're saying. But is there a way really to like fight correctly?
I've never heard that saying. So there is definitely a way to resolve conflict, but I don't know if there's a way to fight correctly.
I have heard where.
I think
Go ahead.
if the welfare of the other individual is at heart, the conflict will be resolved. Remember, we have spoken about this, that we should be living in a self-inclusive manner. A relationship is inclusiveness 101, where there's only one person added to my circle that I have to cater for. So if I'm not able to do the bare minimum of self-inclusive living, fat chance that I'm going to do anything more than that.
Yeah.
Right? We're not saying that there won't be any conflict. But my sense of responsibility towards the well-being of the other person, and not just a sense of responsibility, but actually wanting the welfare of the other person, will provide me with whatever that is needed to overcome the conflict.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And we start with one person, but what we have to do is improve our relationships with the entire community, the society, the world. As long as we remain self-centered, we'll always compromise the well-being of the other in some way or the other.
Yeah, I was just going to say, even just touching on that comment as well, is like, for me, the way I kind of see it or understand it in our marriage is that it's nice to know that when the other person is angry or upset, and that's because they care about something. But then I think where you draw the line is, like you're saying, is where it's that self-inclusive, or whether it's your ego that's driving this, is that to sustain for yourself only, you know. And then also the other thing that I've also seen, and that marriage has helped me to see as well, is that, you know, you're so focused on only seeing life through your eyes, and then when you're in a relationship and in marriage, having someone live with you in that close proximity really opens your eyes to how you live, you know, because they're bringing in a perspective of why you're doing this.
Yeah.
Why, you know, like you did this and now look at the effect it's had on A, B, C and these people, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't know, I feel like that's quite an interesting place to be, and that's kind of where that growth comes in as well.
Yeah.
Where this person's really helping you to unfold as a person and question like everything you've been taught, everything you've grown up with, like just this is just normal day-to-day stuff.
Living with another
Living.
person. Yeah.
You know, like where do you put the kitchen dishwashing sponge? And what do you call it? You know, it's down to that level. I don't think I realize how conditioned we get until, you know, you live with someone who's had a completely different experience. You're like, oh, you do the same? I do the same too. Okay, you do this. Oh, I do this way. Oh, okay, so now
that's
we
a green
find...
flag? Yeah, did I use it correctly? Yeah. So relationships are about expanding our horizons and becoming more self-inclusive. If we keep that constantly in mind, I think we'll be making the right decisions. If we get caught up in what about me, it's going down a rabbit hole, and you'll have so many questions and so many options and so much confusion because really there's no end to it.
Yeah, because you're just chipping away and you're gonna keep discovering more. That itch of desire will always be there.
Yep.
I do have a question about kind of what we talked about in the last episode, about how when you enter marriage, there should be clear purposes, and there's what you get on the physical, emotional, intellectual, and spiritual levels. If, for example, you've entered a relationship and you're like quite committed in this relationship, or you've entered even marriage, and now you're kind of discovering that, oh, like these are conversations I probably should have had before. So
Yes.
in those situations, is there opportunity to reconcile that stuff, or is there no hope, or like how would you kind of approach those conversations? Because if you really love someone and you want to make it work, like the desire to make it work is there, but it's quite a difficult thing to reconcile, especially those intellectual and emotional, spiritual. Yeah
It's case to case basis.
I guess because
What's most important?
To you as a couple, or to you individually?
At the end of the day, we all come alone and we go alone. Each jiva is here on a journey of its own. We cannot forget that. We can't, when we say what's our goal as a couple, we've said being a couple is the most important thing in life now. So you have to evaluate it from the jiva perspective. Because at the end of the day, nor are you really Pooja, nor am I Ishan, nor are you Akash. We are all jivas, taken up this body, given a name, and we're living this life out based on our vasanas. And hereafter, we'll have a completely different life, completely different bodies. So if you think about it, we may have already gone through the experiences of millions of marriages already. This is not the first time we're trying to figure it out. Right?
Should really tap into all those experiences then.
Learn some lessons.
Some say if you have learned the lessons, you won't enter it again.
Clearly, thank you.
No, that's just a joke, guys. That's just a joke.
You're like 6,000 lives later, it's the same problem.
So, we have to evaluate it from that jiva perspective. And this is what scriptures base their instructions on. What is best for the jiva? Not what we enjoy as this personality. Because the mind with its emotions and the intellect with its values is prone to change. Whereas that jiva is an ongoing entity which has the mind and intellect which are changing. And so scriptures approach life from the standpoint of jiva, and we are constantly trying to evaluate it based on the perspective of body, mind, and intellect.
Yep.
And therefore we find it so hard to reconcile everything.
Okay. So our first step is incorrect, is what I've been hearing throughout. We're
Understanding
approaching-
ourselves
Yeah.
at all 4 levels: physical,
Mm.
emotional, intellectual, and spiritual. And that spiritual standpoint is from the standpoint of Jiva.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's been like what I've just learned is we actually have to look at this in the expanded version.
Mm.
You can't,
Yeah.
again, we're just so limited in the way we think and who we are, who we identify as. And I guess that also then comes back to your point earlier in the other podcast, is if these values mean something to you and you hold them dear,
Mm.
then that's what you'll look for in another partner,
Yeah.
which makes it easier to find that compatibility,
Mm.
and so instead of looking for physical red flags, it's like, are we compatible on, do you see?
The bigger scheme of things.
Yeah.
Mm.
And if you're on that, if you understand me on this wavelength, then,
Yeah. And I think looking at it from that lens, a person can even come to the decision that if relationships happen, great. If they don't happen, that's also fine. What is most important is my spiritual unfoldment, finding this inner happiness.
true. Yeah.
And so it's not something that we endlessly chase. It's a option that is available for me.
Mm.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
Thoughts?
Yeah, it's just completely changed my approach to the institution of marriage. And also I think it's going to change maybe how I approach dating as well. And what I'm going to be looking for, prioritizing and finding a partner. So I think it's quite valuable that I've done this without being in a relationship.
And I think I was going to say is also just, from the other side, being someone who's in a marriage and in a relationship, it also is a good opportunity to ask questions too, because we are definitely on the same wavelength and we understand these things, but just expanding on these conversations and, having that space to grow with each other and asking.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd just like to put it out there that I'm not an expert on marriage. And I've tried to answer these from a spiritual, scriptural standpoint to the best of my abilities.
Yeah.
Do not quote me on it. But I'm just doing my best.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Of course.
I'm trying to expressing my understanding of it. Yeah.
Thank you, Shanshi.
Thank you. Lovely conversation, and I hope it helps. That's all.
Most definitely. Thank you, everyone. Hariom.
Hariom.
Hariom. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Thinking is Free, proudly brought to you by Chinmaya Mission New Zealand. For more information on events, courses, Seva projects and study groups, please visit chinmaya.org.nz. Hariom.